4 days after the surgeons fused the bottom of my spine and bolted a little cage of titanium into my lower back, I sat in the discharge lobby of St. Aloysius and typed a message to my own family. "Cleared to go home. Can somebody come get me? I'm at the main doors." My son answered before I'd even set the phone in my lap. "Take an Uber. Pop." Fourth quarter, we're up by 3. His wife piled on right underneath, like she'd been waiting for the opening. "Honestly, stay as long as you want. The house actually smells nice without you in it." They figured that settled things. By the time they started calling me back, and they called more times than I ever bothered to count, I was already gone. And neither one of them had the faintest idea that a single sheet of paper, onesie signature, was about to take everything they thought they'd stolen and burn it right down to the studs. If you've ever given your whole life to people who couldn't spare you a car ride, stick with me. Hit that subscribe button if these stories mean something to you, and do me a favor down in the comments. Tell me what town you're listening from tonight. I like knowing who's out there. Now, everything I'm about to tell you has been shaped a little for the telling, names changed, corners rounded. But the bones of it are as true as my bad back. My name's Everett. I spent 41 years walking high steel, an ironworker, local 44. Back when the valley still had mills that ran 3 shifts, I raised bridges and water towers and the frames of buildings you've probably driven past without ever looking up. My hands are ruined from it. My knees went first, then my shoulders, and finally the spine, which is what put me in that hospital bed, with 4 screws holding my lumbar together, and a plastic brace strapped around my middle like a corset. The nurse who wheeled me down wouldn't let me leave alone at first. That's the truth of it. No matter what you hear on these stories, a hospital doesn't just shove a man who's had spinal fusion out onto the curb. She'd called the number I gave her 3 times. She stood there, holding the phone with that pinched look nurses get when they already know the answer. Finally, I told her, "Look, my ride's a football game. It's not coming." And I signed the paper that said I understood the risks, and a volunteer in a red vest wheeled me out to the taxi stand and waited until the driver, a quiet young fella, helped me ease into the back seat. That was the whole crowd that saw me off, a stranger in a red vest and a cabbie who didn't know my name. I want you to understand who I was giving that car ride to. My son, I'll call him what he was, my boy, was 34. I put him through 2 years of trade school before he decided school wasn't for him. I co-signed his first truck. I paid off a credit card he ran up twice, and the second time I told myself it was the last, and it wasn't. 3 years back, he asked if he and his wife could move into my house just for a little while to save up for a place of their own. My wife had been gone about a year by then, and the house was too quiet, and I said yes because I was lonesome, and because he was my son, and a father's supposed to want his kids close. 3 years later, he was still there, still looking, and the only thing he'd saved up was a talent for looking at me like I was furniture. His wife I never warmed to, and she never warmed to me. She was the kind of woman who could walk into a room and price everything in it inside of 10 seconds. She called me by my first name from the day they married. Never Pop, never Dad, just Everett, said flat, like I was a contractor she was thinking about firing. She tolerated me the way you tolerate a leaky roof you haven't gotten around to fixing. The cab pulled up to the house around 2 in the afternoon. I remember the light was grey and heavy, that flat Ohio Valley sky that can't decide whether to rain. The driver helped me to the porch and I paid him and gave him more than the fare because he'd been kind, and then I stood there fishing for my key. It didn't turn. I jiggled it, thought maybe the cold had swelled the lock. Then I really looked and saw the brass on the knob was too bright, too new. They'd changed the locks while I was on the operating table. I rang my own doorbell like a salesman. It took a while. When my daughter-in-law finally opened the door, she had a glass of white wine in one hand and an expression like I'd interrupted something important. "Oh," she said. "You're back." "The doctor cleared me," I said. My voice came out thinner than I wanted. Every word cost me a little jolt through the brace. "I texted. We saw." She didn't move out of the doorway. Behind her I could hear the television and my son laughing at something and the smell of steak coming off the grill on my back deck. My deck, the one I built. "Look, Everett, We need to talk about the sleeping situation. You cough all night and you're going to be, getting up and shuffling around, and Wesley and I both work." Neither of them worked. So we figured the finished room down in the basement makes the most sense. More privacy for you. Fewer stairs to the bedroom. "There's more stairs to the basement than to my bedroom," I said. She smiled the way a cat smiles at a bird. "It's cooler down there. Better for healing." I stood on my own porch, in a back brace, 4 days out of surgery, and I made a decision that surprised her more than any argument would have. I said, "You're right, the basement's fine." The fight drained right out of her face. She'd loaded up for a war and I'd handed her the flag. She looked almost disappointed. "Well," she said, "good. There's leftovers if you're hungry. We already ate." I went down the stairs one at a time, both hands on the rail, the titanium in my back screaming with every step. The basement was the half-finished one, the one I'd meant to drywall for 20 years and never did. My clothes were down there in contractor bags. My nightstand was there, gouged along one side from being dragged down the steps, and in the middle of the concrete floor was a camping cot with a sleeping bag on it and one flat pillow. That was my homecoming after 4 decades of never missing a mortgage payment. I sat down on the cot and it groaned, and I took my pain pills with water from the utility sink, and I lay there in the dark listening to my family celebrate the fact that I was still alive and out of the way. Here's the thing about that old house that they'd forgotten, if they ever knew it. The ductwork carried sound like a string between 2 tin cans. The cold air return in the master bedroom dumped straight down into a chase, behind a piece of paneling 6 inches from my head. When they turned in that night, I heard every word. "I honestly can't believe he actually went down there," she said. "I thought he'd pitch a fit." "He's whipped," my son said. "You see how grey he looks. My money says he doesn't make it a year. That's the plan." And then, in a lower voice, the kind you use when you think nobody's listening, she laid it all out. There was a facility out past the county line, state-funded. The cheap kind that smells like bleach and canned green beans. They meant to get power of attorney, declare that I couldn't manage on my own. "We document everything," she said. "He falls, he forgets things, he's a danger to himself." And once they had control, they'd sell the house and split before I understood what happened to me. "The lot alone's worth 300 and change," my son said. "We put him in the state place, take the equity, get out of this rust bucket town." "That condo development downtown," she said. "The one with the rooftop pool. That's us." I lay there in the dark with my hands folded on my chest like a man in a casket, and I want to tell you what I felt, because I think people expect it to be grief. It wasn't. The grief had already come and gone in the hospital, 4 in the morning alone. What settled into me on that cot was something colder and steadier. Something I recognized from 40 years of dangerous work. The clean, quiet focus you get right before you do something that can't be undone. Because here's what my son and his wife didn't know. Back in 1979, when I was young and broke and dumb enough to gamble, I bought 26 acres of worthless scrubland out by the river bend for $4,000, meaning to build a fabrication shop someday. Never did. It sat there growing weeds for 40 years, and I paid the little tax bill every fall and forgot about it in between. But this valley's been coming back. A national logistics outfit, I'll call them Meridian, wanted a distribution hub with river and rail access, and my 26 weed-choked acres turned out to be the exact rectangle they needed. For 8 months, I'd been quietly talking to their people through a lawyer. The offer, when it firmed up, was $6.2 million. My boy thought the prize was a $300,000 house. They thought they were the wolves, and I was the sick old sheep. And I lay there in the dark, and I thought, all right, let's find out. I looked at the photograph of my wife I kept in my wallet, her at 40 in a yellow dress, laughing at something I said that I can't remember now. Colette. 2 years in the ground, taken by the cancer that ate her a spoonful at a time while I held her hand. She'd have hated what I was about to do. She was a church-going woman, all forgiveness and casseroles for the grieving. But even she used to say there's a difference between forgiving a man and handing him the knife again. I kissed her paper face, and I put her away, and I picked up my phone. There was one man in this world I trusted with a thing like this. An old friend from the neighborhood, a lawyer named Sol Weinberg, who'd cut corners his whole career and never once cut one on a friend. I typed, "Sol, I need you. It's big and it's ugly. Diner on Route 9, 6 a.m. Don't tell your wife." Then I lay back down and I did not sleep, and somewhere upstairs, my son and his wife dreamed about a rooftop pool. I'd like to pause here for just a second and ask you something, because I know a lot of you have been where I was. Have you ever had the people you'd have died for look at you like a burden? Tell me down in the comments. I read them. It helps to know I'm not the only one. The next morning I told them I needed air, that the surgeon wanted me walking. My daughter-in-law didn't even look up from her phone. Sol was already in a corner booth when the cab dropped me at the diner, and when he saw me shuffle in wearing that brace, hunched like a question mark, his face went hard. I told him everything over eggs I couldn't eat. The socks, the basement, the vent, the nursing home. When I got to the part about the 6.2 million, Sol set down his coffee very carefully. "Everett," he said, "you could just take the money and disappear. Buy a beach somewhere. Let them rot in confusion for the rest of their lives wondering what happened." "I thought about that," I said. "It's not enough." "No," he agreed. "I didn't figure it would be." He pulled a legal pad out of his briefcase. "Then here's what we do. We give them exactly what they think they want. We let them climb all the way up. And then I take the ladder," I said. He almost smiled. "You always did have a mean streak under all that church picnic manners. Here's what we built, Sol and I, over 3 cups of coffee." He'd draw up what looked, to a greedy person in a hurry, like the jackpot. A power of attorney, a deed transferring the house into their names, the whole set. But the real documents underneath the pretty language were a quitclaim in which they renounced every future claim against my estate. A promissory note formalizing 3 years of free rent and every dollar I'd ever lent the boy, itemized, totaling a hair over $190,000, and a plain sheet acknowledging they'd received these terms freely. People who think they're robbing you don't read the fine print. They can't. Greed makes you fast and stupid. And separately, quietly, the sale of the 26 acres would close and the proceeds would drop into an irrevocable trust before either of them signed a thing. You can't inherit what's already given away. "And the confession?" Sol asked. "The nursing home, the power of attorney scheme, that's the ugly part. That's what a judge cares about." "I'll get you the confession," I said. "They can't help themselves." I went home and I started building the fire, one small stick at a time. The first thing I did was let them see me small, weak, grateful for scraps. I stopped complaining about the basement. I said thank you when my daughter-in-law slid a plate of their leftovers down the stairs like she was feeding a dog. I let the fog of the anesthesia, which was real, those first days, my mind slipping and sticking like a bad transmission, do some acting for me. I started forgetting things out loud. Little things. Where I put my glasses, what day it was, and I watched their eyes light up every time, because a forgetful old man is a controllable old man. Then one evening I let it slip that I'd been getting my affairs in order before the surgery. Just a mutter, half to myself at the dinner table where they finally let me sit once the smell of me became bearable to them. "Didn't want to leave a mess for the boy," I said. "Signed some things, put some things aside. You should have seen them go still." My son set his fork down. His wife's whole body turned toward me like a plant to the sun. "What kind of things, Everett?" she asked, and she'd put honey in her voice for the first time in years. "Oh, I don't remember," I said, rubbing my temple. "The doctor said the medicine muddles me. Papers. In the safe, maybe. Or the storage unit. I can't recall. I didn't have a storage unit. They tore that town apart looking for it. My son spent an entire Saturday driving to 3 different self-storage places on the strip, coming home sweating and furious, while I sat on the good couch. They'd let me up onto the good couch by then, and told him gently that maybe I'd been confused, maybe it was the garage after all. So he emptied the garage. 40 years of my life in cardboard boxes, hauled out onto the driveway in the drizzle, my son on his knees in the wet gravel, with his soft hands going through my things. This boy who'd told me at 19 that manual labor was for people without options. I watched from the window. I'd raised him to think work was beneath him, and I'll own that. That failure is mine. But I made him work that week. Lord, did I make him work? I told my daughter-in-law that I ate better when I felt cared for, and that when I felt cared for, my memory came back. Then I asked for my wife's chicken and dumplings, the real way, the way Colette made it, and I described the whole day-long process. The bird broken down by hand, the celery diced fine as confetti, the dough rolled and cut and rested. I watched a woman who ordered delivery 6 nights a week stand at my stove for 5 hours with flour up to her elbows, cursing under her breath, because at the bottom of every pot she saw that rooftop pool. She made it 3 days running. It was terrible every time. I ate every bite and asked for more and told her it was bringing my memories back, real, slow. I want to tell you about the moment the last soft thing in me toward those two turned to stone. Because it wasn't the basement, and it wasn't the locks. It was the piano. Colette taught piano to neighborhood kids for 30 years on an old upright in the front room, $5 a lesson. Half of them free because the family couldn't pay. That piano was where I proposed to her, down on one knee on the bench because I was too nervous to do it standing. About a week into all this, I noticed the front room looked wrong, and it took me a full day to understand why. The piano was gone. When I asked, my daughter-in-law waved a hand and said they'd needed the space and a guy had given them a couple $100 for it. That night, up in the master bathroom hunting for the pain pills my son had borrowed, I opened Colette's old jewelry box, the little cherry wood one I'd bought her on our 10th anniversary, and I found her wedding ring gone. In its place, shoved down in the felt, was a folded pawn ticket. Ace Pawn, over on Delancey. One lady's wedding band, 14K, diamond, $650, and stapled to the back of it, because my daughter-in-law was too lazy even to be careful, was a receipt from the Riverwind Casino out on the interstate. Same date. Dinner for 2, top shelf bar tab, a room, $680. They pawned my dead wife's wedding ring. The ring I slid onto her finger in 1974. The ring she was supposed to be buried in until she made me promise to save it for a granddaughter that these two were never going to give me. And they took the money to a casino. They traded 40 years of that woman's love for a night of prime rib and slot machines. I stood in that green bathroom she'd never have chosen, and I felt my heart do something quiet and final. I put the ticket in my pocket, and I stopped feeling bad about a single thing I was going to do. The next part I did with a $20 security camera and my wife's old tablet. I told them I was too tired to sit at the table anymore, and that I'd take my meals in the front room. And I set up a little camera on the bookshelf, pointed at the couch, told them it was a baby monitor thing so I could call for help if I fell. They didn't give it a second look. Old men and their gadgets. It ran to Colette's tablet, which I kept under my cot, and it caught sound clear across the whole first floor. It caught my daughter-in-law on the phone with the county facility, asking about the cheapest wing. It caught my son laughing and saying, as soon as he signs, we dump him. Who cares if it smells like a diaper? He's not going to know the difference in 6 months. It caught her saying the words power of attorney out loud and incompetent, and we just have to get through the paperwork before he croaks. It caught everything, and when I judged them good and ripe, I baited the last hook. I told my son one evening, my voice trembling just enough, that I couldn't keep up the house anymore, that the stairs were killing me, that I wanted to sign it all over to him and go someplace peaceful and just rest. I told him the papers were already drawn up. An old friend of mine, a lawyer, had prepared them, and that all I wanted was to make sure the two of them were taken care of before my heart gave out. I have never in my life seen a man move so fast to help his father. Suddenly it was cushions behind my back and blankets over my knees and can I get you anything? Pop, anything at all. Suddenly I was dad again. Saul came to the house that Thursday in a good suit, very official, very grave, and spread the documents across my dining room table. He explained them in the syrup of legal language that makes greedy people's eyes glaze. My son signed everywhere Saul's finger pointed, barely glancing down. My daughter-in-law read a little more carefully. She always thought she was the smart one. But she was reading for the words she wanted, the deed, the transfer, the power of attorney, and she found them right there on top, exactly where we'd put them. She signed. She was so happy she cried. She hugged Sol. She hugged me, the first time she'd ever touched me, and I felt nothing at all. What she'd signed, of course, was the quitclaim renouncing her claim to my estate, the promissory note for $191,000, and an acknowledgement that she'd entered into it freely, all of it dated the day after the 26 acres and their $6.2 million had already vanished into a trust she could never reach. The house I gave them still had my name on the mortgage they didn't know existed, one I'd taken against it that spring to fund the land deal's lawyers. They didn't inherit an asset. They inherited a debt, a mortgage, and a confession. And then they did the last thing I needed them to do. They threw a party. His wife couldn't help it. She rented the ballroom at Rosewood, the country club that had turned my kind of people away for 100 years, and she invited everybody she wanted to impress. The developer types, the ladies from the club she'd been sucking up to, a couple of local somebodies. It was billed as a family celebration. My son bought a tuxedo on a credit card that I would later learn my daughter-in-law had opened in my name, forging my signature, running up $11,000 while I lay in the hospital. She'd committed a felony to buy that tuxedo. That, more than anything, is what put the handcuffs on her. Identity theft against an elderly man is a thing the state of Ohio takes very seriously. I let them dress me up and prop me in a chair near the front like the trophy I was supposed to be. Sol stood at the back by the AV booth, where he'd slipped the sound tech $100 to keep a certain microphone live, no matter what anyone said. The room was full of chandeliers and champagne that would never be paid for. My son got up to the podium in his too-tight tuxedo and tapped the microphone and thanked everyone for coming. He said tonight was about family. He said his father, a simple, hard-working man, had decided to hand the stewardship of the family's affairs over to him and his lovely wife. Golf claps went around the room. His wife glowed in a silver dress that looked like it was made out of knives. Then he called me up to say a few words. It took me a long time to cross that floor with my cane, and the whole room watched with that soft pity people give to the old. My son took the microphone off the stand and put it in my hand and beamed at the crowd, waiting for the sentimental fumbling of a grateful old fool. "Thank you," I said. "My son says tonight's about family. He's right. It's about knowing who your family really is." He nodded, encouraging. "Keep it moving, Pop. I want to tell you all a story," I said, "about a man who spent 41 years walking steel a quarter-mile up in the sky so his son would never have to work with his hands. And when that man came out of surgery with screws in his spine and asked his boy for a ride home, his boy told him to take an Uber because the game was on." A few uncertain laughs. They thought it was a roast. "And when that man got home," I said, and I let my voice drop and harden, "he found his son had changed the locks and put him in the basement on a camping cot because the smell of a healing old man offended his daughter-in-law's nose." The laughter died. My daughter-in-law's smile came apart at the corners. "They pawned his dead wife's wedding ring," I said, "into a room gone silent as a church for $650, and they spent it at a casino. And every night, through the ductwork, that old man in the basement listened to the two of them plan how to have him declared insane and dumped in a state home so they could sell his house and buy a condo with a rooftop pool."
Ah, Dad!
My son had his hand out for the microphone, his face draining white. "Dad, you're confused. This isn't." "I have never been less confused in my life, son," I said, and I nodded to the back of the room. The big screen behind the podium, the one that was supposed to run their happy family slideshow, flickered to grey, and there was my living room, and there was my daughter-in-law's voice pouring out of the club's expensive speakers, crisp and venomous. "As soon as he signs, we dump him. Who cares if it smells like a diaper?" Then my son's voice, laughing, "He won't last a year." Then her on the phone with the county facility, asking for the cheapest room they had. The gasp that went through that ballroom is a sound I will hear on my deathbed and smile. "That's a fake," my daughter-in-law shrieked, on her feet now. "That's AI. That's not real." The screen cut to her at my dining table, holding up my wife's cherrywood jewelry box, saying to my son, "These old lady rings are worth something. Let's take them tonight. I want the good vodka." That did it. These were wealthy people, Snobs, but even snobs have a flaw, and selling a dead woman's ring for casino vodka was under it. A man near the bar booed. The developer types were already reaching for their coats. I turned to my son. He was grey now, the colour I'd been in the hospital, the colour of a man watching the floor open. "You wanted to be the man of the family," I said quietly, and the live mic carried it to every corner. "A man pays his own way. A man doesn't rob his father and sleep in his bed while the old man freezes on a cot. You didn't inherit anything tonight, son. You signed a note for $191,000 and a mortgage, and you signed away every claim you ever had to me. The land you never knew about was sold and given to a scholarship 2 weeks ago. There's nothing to take. There never was, once you showed me who you are." He lunged for me then, fist up, in front of 300 people, ready to hit his own father. Sol had planned for that too. 2 men who'd been standing quietly by the wall, off-duty officers Sol had hired, had him on the floor with his arm behind his back before he got within reach of me. And right about then the real siren started outside, because the $11,000 in my name, the forged signature that had already been reported, and the detectives had simply been waiting for the party to gather everyone in one convenient room. They cuffed my daughter-in-law in her silver dress by the coat check. She kicked and screamed and cursed my name and my sons and God's. They cuffed my boy on his knees on the ballroom floor, and he was crying, snot on his rented lapels, saying, "Dad, please, don't let them take me, I'm your son." I looked down at him for a long moment. "I had a son," I said. "He died somewhere along the way, and I didn't notice, and that's the one thing here I'll carry. But I don't know who you are." They walked them both out the service entrance so as not to disturb the guests, which struck me as the last courtesy that family would ever receive. Out front, a tow truck was already backing up to the leased sports car my daughter-in-law had parked across 2 spaces. I stood in the cool night with Sol's hand on my shoulder and watched them drive my children away in the back of a county cruiser, and my back didn't hurt at all. "Where to?" Sol asked when it was over. "North," I said. "There's a lake up in Michigan a buddy of mine's been telling me about for 20 years. That was 7 months ago. The 2 of them turned on each other before the ink dried on the arrest reports. Their divorce wasn't a fight over who got what. There was no what. It was a fight over who owed what. She took a plea on the identity theft and did 90 days and a long probation and paid back what she could, which wasn't much. Last I heard she was couch surfing, dodging the same debt collectors she used to look down on. My son works a loading dock now, of all things, hauling freight for a distribution company, moving boxes with the soft hands he was so sure would never have to. A fella I know saw him there being chewed out, a kid, half his age, for stacking a pallet wrong, and he just stood there and took it. He looks older, I'm told. He looks like a man who finally understands what a thing costs. Me, I'm sitting on a dock in the UP, as I tell you this, with a line in the water and a coffee going cold beside me. There's 2 old union brothers up here with me, guys who never asked me for a dime in 50 years, and we play cribbage at night and lie about the fish. My back's healing slow, but it's healing. The scar down my spine is a silver zipper now, and underneath it the steel holds fine. There's a stack of folders on the table by the boathouse, applications for the Colette Kowalski Memorial Trade Scholarship. Full tuition, and a set of tools for young people going into the crafts, the welders and the electricians and the pipe fitters, the ones who'll build the next 100 years while everybody else stares at a screen. I read every essay myself. Last week I approved a girl from Flint who wants to be an iron worker, the first woman our locals ever sponsored, and I wrote on her acceptance letter that the beam doesn't care who you are, it only cares whether you show up. Those kids are my family now. They're the children I should have raised the boy to be. My phone buzzed on the dock a few days ago. A number I'd deleted but knew on sight. A wall of words. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I know I messed up. I'm trying, I really am. But rent's due and I've got nothing, please, just a little help. I miss you. I love you." 2 years ago that would have gutted me. I'd have wired the money before I finished reading and hated myself and done it again the next month. I sat there on the warm boards and read it twice and waited to feel the old pull. There was nothing. Not anger, not even sorrow, Just the wide quiet of the lake and a loon calling somewhere out past the reeds. I didn't reply. I stood up, and I held the phone out over the water for a second, watching the sun catch it, and then I let go. It turned end over end and hit the surface with a small sound and sank, and the rings spread out and smoothed away like it had never been there at all. "Lost something?" one of my brothers called from the shore. "No," I said. "Just cleaning out my tackle box." I picked up my rod and cast the line back out into the gold water, and for the first time since I don't know when, I felt like a man who was just getting started. I gave my whole life to steal, and to a woman who deserved it, and to a boy who didn't, and I lost the boy, but I finally found something I'd misplaced a long time back, somewhere up on those beams over an unfinished city. I found myself, and it turns out he was worth saving all along.